Hi everyone, it's Skillshare Fashion Drawing Tutorials, and in this video we're going to render this puffer jacket and overall look by Moncler. And here are the tools that we're going to need. And we're starting from the pose and putting clothing on the body. I'm using the template that I uploaded for level 3 patrons and higher. But here, if you want to locate the knees, the left side knee is at the neck level and the right side knee is just a bit to the side from the right side shoulder. Try not to push hard on your pencil because we're going to get rid of all these lines after we draw the clothing on here. But it's really important to draw the body because you need to know the structure, you need to know the relief of the body in order to position everything correctly. Because sometimes people start drawing like skirt or shoes without really drawing legs. It's totally wrong. So unless you have some fantastic fantasy that you can just feel, it is almost there in your head. But at this step when learning, you better draw the body. So face, I'm just fixing some features. And recently I have really long tutorials. What do you think about that? Do you prefer like shorter videos, or you're fine with longer ones? Actually, it takes like 3-4 hours to draw all of this, and then I just get rid of all unnecessary things and speed up everything a bit, so at least we have 50 minutes or an hour. So we have really big sunglasses, and here it's important just to draw it symmetrically, to have a proper size of this opening for the nose. And when the face is turned to the side a bit, usually you have that part of the glass that is beyond the face. Even if you have like smaller sunglasses, usually you have at least a bit outside. So at this point everything is very rough. So next we have a turtleneck, like a sweater, or at least a sleeve part that looks so. So I'm trying not to draw it perfectly elliptic. I'm just drawing, I'm making it a bit lower at the front. But I believe it's quite thick, so it's still more or less straight. Not like very soft knitted turtlenecks. And next we have the second layer, is already the sleeve part of the puffer jacket. You can see that everything is rounded, no sharp corners. And again, I'm not drawing it perfectly. I'm trying to make this lower edge a bit imperfect. So then we have shoulders. And shoulders are, look at that slope. It's like diagonal, like almost 45 degrees. And I just imagine that there is some filling between shoulders and the outline of the jacket. There is some filling for the warmth. So my jacket shoulders are higher. And I'm drawing this front part almost till her knees. And the sleeve is going to be like bigger. So the holes for the sleeves are big, and the hemline, usually, as you remember, we draw it following some ellipse because this clothing is surrounding her legs. That's why the sides of the hemline go a little bit up. So it looks like this like curve It's not a straight line below, it's a curve. So we have this kind of triangular backside, and the division is at the sleeve level. Here, let's just move the shoulder line a bit to the inside because we see a little bit of the back. And I'm drawing really wide sleeves. Also take into account where your hips are, because your overall arm length is going to be like below the hips. You'll have the hands below the hips. Here she has some parts like some sleeves visible, and we're drawing her hands. I feel like your thumb is tiny, and yeah, that's fine. Adding the other sleeve. Also, as I told you before, feel free to share recommendations, because actually research for like looking for what to draw, thinking about it also takes a lot of time, because there are so many options and sometimes I have no idea what you want, and I think like this or this and I get confused. So now I'm drawing just some details of the design. We have some different segments colored having different hues. And we have the pocket here. Now I'm drawing her boots, and here we have some gatherings with like a band, elastic band, and we have some sort of patent leather or PVC, and it's gathered in like 3 parts. And whenever something wide is gathered, we get those loop folds that I described once in the tip, and we actually come back to that type of folds quite often when we have this sort of folds. So here we have this elastic band and the other side, but we need to draw the bag. So let's draw the straps. And we'll have some like rectangular fastening. Okay, so take into account the distance on the sides of these metal details. So you have more or less equal distance. Why more or less? Because if one side is a bit closer to you, it's going to be slightly longer than the side at the back. So I'm drawing, you can see I'm drawing at the angle. So here it's a bit sloped lines, and here I draw the other side at the angle. So if you ever drew boxes, you know that I'm showing 2 sides to show that it's a 3-dimensional object. And here these front and back sides are a bit longer than this right side, so I show it by making it shorter, and these edges are a bit longer. Okay, so more or less we have the shape. Let's finish here. Here we have some piece of something also the same material as your jacket. Here we have some letters V and M. And here we actually have this as a handle, not like a baggage tag as I thought in the beginning. Okay, so shoes. Drawing this massive textured soles. Alright, so let's start rendering the textures. I'm using mint green and I'm also using holly. These markers are close to what I'm seeing. Maybe the choice is not exactly as on the original design, but let's see how it works. So here we have diagonal quilting, and we just make this parts between the threads a bit elevated. The other side should be more or less symmetrical, because when you fasten the jacket, they should build one line. Okay, now get rid of excess of pencil, so when we use marker, we don't smudge the pencil. I'm spreading black marker, and I'm also spreading holly, and I'm going to use mint green, and sometimes I'm going to mix mint green with those two markers. I just colored the area that should be like white, but okay, so let's make it a little bit wrinkled. And yeah, I start from here. I'm using mint green. You can color everything with it and then just add the shadows. We can start with the holly and then build transition with a mix of mint and holly. So because the central area of this segment is elevated, it's light, so we add all those folds and shadows around. And now I'm adding just mix of mint and holly to not to have this strong contrast between light and dark area. So not to have holly and mint separated. So you can add black in the darkest folds. You can just pick some. It's not like there is some rule. Just any fold can be deep enough to look super dark. Just you can see that the folds are all located around this, along the outline of this segment, because there we have thread that builds this tension for the fabric and makes these folds. They look like lines and sometimes diagonal lines. You can first draw those folds and shadows with holly and then color everything with mint. Really, the order doesn't matter. And if you use some other color, like maybe yellow, then maybe your base color will be some light yellow and then you have some gold and caramel. Or if you use red, then you'll have pink, red, and burgundy. Or sometimes also you'll mix with black. So the principle is the same, the steps. So you just make the sides darker, you make some of those folds super dark, you keep some lighter spots that you don't color with anything but mint. And just to keep some highlights. And of course, more highlights you have, more shiny and glossy your jacket is. So every segment that we are coloring right now looks like this. Its scent is elevated, and all the sides have these thread lines. And inside we have some filling that makes this puffer jacket warm. And the light, it comes from the front, and everything that is less elevated is darker. So the darkest are parts close to the thread lines. And because of the thread lines, we have all those loop folds, like tiny loop folds. And we have here also fastened pockets. And so on. Like, it's similar work, and try to draw all those shadows and folds in a different way, so each part is unique. And it would be cool if you use some other color, maybe purple or violet jackets, if you draw it, or even add some pattern on the top. You can draw it like this, and then using some oil pencils you can add some floral pattern or camouflage and see how it looks. It would be really cool. Because it's really like, more you draw, more you fantasize, the better your fantasy works. Like, your imagination will thrive because of just stimulation. So now, after making all those folds and shadows, I color everything with mint green. And while everything is wet, I'm adding extra holly. And if there is a wet surface, the marker, it is applied in a bit lighter way, so it doesn't look the same way as the other layer that we made before. So I'm wetting again the surface, and I'm adding holly on the top of previous holly layer, and it looks a bit lighter. So this is also a quality of a marker, and I really like using this feature of the marker with the skin. So now I'm adding a bit of black, especially close to the thread lines, and making some of those folds darker. So I'm not just repeating everything, I'm just coloring in certain places. So really, like, when I render the skin, I don't wait till each layer dries, because for the skin you really need to have a soft transition from darker areas to highlights. So I'm using this quality. I color with the lightest marker for a certain skin tone, and then I use darker ones on the top while it's still wet. Okay, so we have pockets. Let's add some shadows between the sleeves and the bodice. Okay, and here you can stop at any point. It might look a bit rough. More you work, it's not always better, but like, you can invest your time into working with details, and you know, it might take longer to draw this jacket, so depends on effort. Here, because we have this thin thread line here as well, we have all these tiny folds, like we have the fabric tension, and here we have this very common for the puffer jackets, like wrinkles, like zigzaggish, that look like scribbling. I'm using ice gray to a little bit to desaturate this jacket. When it dries, it will be less green. I mean, just a little bit less green, because for me now the color looks like watermelon color, so I want it to to reduce this saturation. So I colored the central part with mint. It's still wet, so I'm using holly. Again, adding more of the wrinkles on the sides, because on each side of this stripe we have threads, like thread line. And here as well I'm using ice gray. You can use ice gray 3 or ice gray 4. Okay, I'm going to work in the same way with the other side. Here I missed like one segment, so I need to fix everything. So I have both sides with symmetrical stripes. But I always say don't draw things symmetrically, not that you don't follow the design or something. You just don't draw the same like lighting. You don't show the same lighting, like one side can be darker or the other side can be lighter. You can draw different wrinkles. It's not about the design, it's about just physical like the interaction with the environment on your drawing. So one side is a bit different than the other one. So again, I'm adding all those wrinkles here, even in a more lazy way, like really fast, with the holly marker. So, and again, like I'm just breaking the order. Instead of starting coloring it with mint, I decided to mix holly with black and show those darker folds. So here we don't have a very delicate fabric. It's not a smooth silk where you need to be a bit more consistent. It's quite rough. So I let myself draw in any order. Okay, now I'm coloring everything with mint. And again, while still wet, I'm adding holly. And you can even see from the video that it's a little bit more transparent than the other layer of a holly when we applied it on the dry paper. So it's a bit lighter now. And it's really good to build the gradient. So now I'm using ice gray one more time. You can use ice gray 3 if your overall layer is dark, and ice gray 4 if it's still light, and it's fine to use darker gray. So now I'm coloring this part that is glossy with pine. Pine marker is similar to holly. I think it's just a bit warmer and slightly lighter. But those are very close hues. So you can see that holly is a bit colder. So I'm using ice gray 4, adding some shadows on the sleeve part, like and you can use pine or you can use holly, mix it with black and add some wrinkles, because really with this mix with black you don't really see the difference, because these two markers are so close. Next, I'm taking black pencil and really showing these thread lines. So dividing these segments with black lines, and also showing some of those wrinkles, and adding extra highlights with white pencil. If you have really strong wrinkles, you can add some highlights in between to show them. Also, those wrinkles that are close to the thread lines can be darker. They can be really like black, but if you draw wrinkles in the middle of this like puffy area try to not to push hard on your pencil. You can make them like grayish, just because the darker value shows the depth, and you probably won't have that deep folds just in the middle of this part. Like, imagine that this is a pillow, so the center of the pillow is really elevated. It might have wrinkles, but not super deep ones. So this pencil, I really need to find some different pencil very soon, like some oil pencil that is really thick and opaque, because this one is quite noisy and it doesn't give me the result that I'm looking for. Okay, so now I'm dividing these parts, because if you take a look at the right side part, it's just everything is like one huge like, I don't know, like it's not like a puffer jacket. There is no quilting, so that's why we're using this black pencil. If you have super dark green, you can try it too. It's just all the green pencils that I've got, they would disappear, because they are of very similar hue to holly and pine. Here I'm pushing harder on the pencil because this area is glossy and the highlights are super strong. And here I'm adding some, like, to show that it's really glossy. I need some even stronger highlights, so I'm using white ink pen. For Sakura ones, it's like number 10. So, and more of the shadows with ice gray 4. On each side of this front stripe, we're going to draw like double lines, and between those two black lines you're adding one line with a white pencil. It's a kind of a really thin version of the same like puffy area, because you have two thread lines in between, you have some elevated part. That's why we use white pencil. And for puffer jacket sleeves, it's very common to have this zigzag-ish folds, like you can see at those highlights I left on the sleeve. So you can draw something similar always, like when you draw really thick puffer jackets. And here again I'm showing those typical wrinkles. Here I'm using mint. Okay, while everything is drying, let's work with your skin. I'm using caramel. And usually when I draw sunglasses, even if they are super dark, I render everything below it, unless it's something, you know, like reflective, when it doesn't, when it's not see-through. But in our case, they're pink and see-through. Next, I'm using Almond, and as I told you before, while it's still wet, I'm applying caramel again. And caramel is applied in a lighter way. And then I'm adding a bit of Almond again, so I get a better transition. More of the caramel. Next, I'm showing some details that I usually show. Nostrils, lips, eyes. And next, I'm using a purple pencil for all the other details, like the shape of the nose, any shadows that I've got. Here I have some shadows from her sunglasses, like shadows inside of her ears, just some visible parts of her neck, eyelids. And I'm using baby pink to color your sunglasses. Even if your sunglasses were like red, because they're not like thick red, it's glasses. So I would use baby pink as a base and then just add more. So I spread red marker on the surface, like any solid surface. You can use it as a palette. And I'm spreading the red, especially on the top, so everything goes down, like gradually everything becomes lighter. And I even mix with black a little bit, so the upper part is darker. So you can, like any transparent glasses, you can work in the same way. If they were like green, I would use some lighter green as a base and then add darker green on the top. I messed it up a little bit on the side, so they now look like having extra kind of frame. And I'm adding a bit of white pencil on the side just for this see-through effect. And adding details and some highlights. Whenever you mix markers with each other, just for example, I mixed baby pink with red and black, spread your marker on a clean paper till you get pure color, like pure baby pink, and then your marker is fine. So you can mix them, just make sure that you clean them. So I'm working in the same way as I worked before. I'm mixing holly with black, making this sides darker. Now using mint, mixing it with holly so I can build a better transition from mint to holly. Working on the borders while still we're adding holly. Okay, so with Cool Gray 2, I'm showing the wrinkles that we have along this part. And the same way as we added with the holly, the wrinkles along the seam lines. Now I want to make this highlight stronger, so I'm adding extra white pencil. And once you like build all these shadows properly and then add white pencil on the top, these wrinkles, they start looking really realistically. Just try to think about wrinkles. Every time you draw them, every time you see them, think why they look the way they look. Like what forces make them have those shapes and those like that depth. Because like random wrinkles are like obvious on the drawings when the fold shouldn't be there. It just looks weird. So here I'm working the same way as I worked with the left side. Also adding all those diagonal wrinkles with first with holly. Everything is like dry for now. That's why I'm adding pencils. It's like a kind of a final step. And I really want to make this side darker, so I'm using Ice Gray 4. Just coloring a lot of it. So once I had a question about working with marker on top of pencil. I do it not that often, and usually when I do that, in most of cases I use watercolor pencils because wax or oil pencils are thick and they can bit by bit damage your markers if you do that very often. Plus they don't blend that well as like watercolor pencils. So here we also have the thread line, like 2 black pencil lines and 1 white pencil line in between. And along that thread line, I'm making all these tiny spots showing the tiny wrinkles along the seams. And now I'm showing here, if you remember, we drew this typical wrinkles for the puffer jacket, and every wrinkle and fold is something like a mountain. It has a light top and it has dark sides. With white pencil we're showing the light top of those wrinkles. And with black pencil we're showing some shadows on the sides of those wrinkles. Also add shadows under that like upper detail that we didn't color yet. Haven't colored yet. So and that glossy part, let's add some strong highlights with a white ink pen. Okay, so here we have, I use Ice Gray 4, then I use Mint just to make it a bit more green, adding shadows with black pencil. And now I'm using Petrol Blue. I'm actually planning to color her back with it, but I had this idea of using it for some shadows on the jacket, because I just like using some like a marker of a different hue to add shadows or highlights. It just makes the drawing more dynamic, more interesting. So I'm adding some all these divisions like between these parts and all those darker wrinkles. I'm adding more of them, but in this case not with a mix of a black but with a petrol blue. It's optional. You can use steel, you can use holly, or any other color that is similar. I just want to build this link between her back and her jacket. Plus, adding darker color increases contrast, and for those of you who love contrast, it would make your drawing the way you want it to look. Okay, So I like it. So now just color everything, the whole bag, with Petrol Blue. Now I'm taking Petrol Blue, now I'm taking Holly, sorry, and mixing with black, because here we have this part. It can actually be pine because it's also a glossy part. But I'm going to use the same colors that I used for her jacket. So I'm mixing mint with holly, holly with black, just trying to build this high contrast effect. So while that accessory is drying, I'm showing this loop folds and just area above it. And we have strong shadows just under her jacket. And again, we have a tip of the day that is dedicated to these loop folds. You can just go through all the tips of the day, and they usually appear when some white piece of material is gathered like tightly in. You can see here we have this elastic band that is gathering this PVC together. So we get loop folds above and loop folds below. They are not of a perfect shape, which is okay, which looks very naturally, but I'm using black marker just to define them. So here more loop folds. And here we have this opening. Next I'm using Cool Gray 5, and I'm coloring inside of these folds. Sometimes I keep certain spots uncolored because we have so many wrinkles on this piece that some spots have strong highlights, some are in the shadow. It's just such a type of material. So Cool Gray 5. Some Cool Gray 2. I want to make all these like kind of white path, really long pieces, a bit thinner, like more narrower, so we don't have a huge white spots. And again, I'm trying to build the impression. I'm not going for like drawing every detail. I want just to build the impression of some PVC boots. So you can use Ice Gray 4. I'm just trying to mix Cool Gray, Ice Gray, so it looks more like having different values there. Usually darker values around black, and then a bit lighter ones around that gray. Okay, so now I can add some strong highlights using white ink pen. I'm using Sakura white pen number 10. 10 has quite thick flow of the ink. And here we have a zipper. I'm going just to show it with these dashes. I just randomly choose these light spots and color partially along them. Not really following any specific rule. Also showing some vertical lines where we're supposed to have like elastic band, like this gathering. Okay, so here I added some highlights with white pencil and white pen, and I showed those metallic details just with squared brackets using white pen. And all the details I'm going just to show with white pen and then adding shadows along it. So for example, now I have this V letter. So I'm drawing it with white pencil and then adding shadows on the right side, showing the outline a little bit on the other side. So, and then I have M. And again, because this is not a drawing on the top of the bag, I need to show the shadows and in that way detach this letter from the surface of the bag. So now it's on the top of it. It's not a print. And here we have this long handle. And here we need to color with the Petrol Blue. So I tried to color on that border in order not to have like clear line at the bottom that shows that I forgot to color the whole thing. So I'm adding some highlights on the back with white pencil. So I told you before, this pencil gives this noisy effect. So I need to get really thick oil pencil for all these procedures. Adding shadows on this. I have like dogs. Can you hear them? Not my dogs, just outside. Okay. So she has some sweater part visible. I'm coloring it with the gold, and I'm using the same gold Promarker for the soles of your shoes. And I'm adding some caramel dots on, just added the caramel dots on your sleeve and made strokes with a brown pencil. And I use warm gray, usually 3 for the skin and any warm shadows. Okay, some just outlining, adding extra shadows with a black pencil. Once your finger dries, I will color everything with skin tone. Okay, with a black marker, I'm just showing some details of your shoes, so they are not just cool gray 5. She has some shoelaces, some front details. I'm just showing everything in the shadow. And you can add more highlights. You can add highlights on the top of shoelaces so they're more visible. Like this. And since this thing is glossy too, I'm adding some highlights with white ink pen. And now I'm using burnt orange as the base color for this upper part of her jacket. Just coloring everything with one layer. So next I'm mixing the burnt orange with black, adding shadows between that two different parts, and then showing this vertical lines to show this ribbing on that knitted part, and then with the mix also showing this folds on the puffer part. Okay, and the other side. Okay, so extra shadows, just some more of those ribbings, and then I'm using black for her hair, leaving some highlighted area between those strokes. Then using ice gray 4, just working on the edges. And I need to add some strokes in order to make this look more like hair, not like a cap. So I'm making all these strokes with a black pencil. And since she has wax on her hair, I'm using some white ink pen. So if she has some clean hair without anything on top, then don't use white ink pen. Just leave highlights. Maybe use just light gray between black. So we're done with this tutorial. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you learned something new for yourself. Please share your questions and suggestions, and see you very soon in a new tutorial. Thank you very much for being my patron and supporting my art.